1973 was an incredible NFL season. Let's take a look at the excitement. There were a lot of exciting rookie running backs in 1973. Bengals running back Charles "Booby" Clark was a 12th round draft pick as a tight end. Weighing a whopping 245 pounds, he rushed for 988 yards and 8 touchdowns while chipping in with 45 catches for 347 yards. He was the AFC Rookie of the Year. Cullen Bryant was a defensive back at Colorado in college and played strictly as a kickoff returner as a rookie. He ran the 40-yard dash in 4.4 seconds and could bench press 400 pounds. And they say that players today are bigger, faster, and stronger. If so, then why isn't someone running a sub-4 and benching 500 pounds as a kick returner or defensive back? It's been 50 years. Daryle Lamonica was a Pro Bowl player in 1972, but it would be Raiders backup quarterback Ken Stabler who would make the Pro Bowl in 1973. It was the end of an era for Lamonica, age 32, as he only played in 8 games and started only 3, while passing for 2 touchdowns and 8 interceptions and a horrendous 38.6 quarterback rating. The Oakland Raiders did not lose to the Denver Broncos in Denver every year from 1963 through 1973, and they extended the streak through the 1977 season. One team that had trouble winning any games was the Oilers. Their head coach was Bill Peterson, and he signed a 10-year contract after only finishing 1 year of a 5-year contract at Rice University. In 1972, the Oilers were next to last in the NFL in points allowed and next to last in points scored when they finished with 1 win and 13 losses. After a 5-game losing streak to start the 1973 season, the Oilers fired Peterson and his 1-win, 16-loss record. Future Hall of Famer Sid Gilman took over as the Oilers head coach, but it didn't help. The Oilers only won 1 game for the rest of the year. In 1973, the NFL made it illegal to jump on, stand on, or be picked up by a teammate in an attempt to block a kick. Why take the fun out of the game? They also made it a rule that uniform numbers in the 90s could only be worn during the preseason when rosters were large. All players in the NFL who played in 1972 could wear the numbers from that year, however. Let's check out the stifling Rams defense. The Rams' Chuck Knox was a first-year head coach in 1973, and he turned them from a 6-win, 7-loss, 1-tie team in 1972 to a 12-win, 2-loss team, with the 2 losses being by a total of 3 points to the Vikings and Falcons in back-to-back weeks. In Week 6 against the Packers, Fred Dreyer had a defensive lineman's dream as he tackled quarterback Scott Hunter for a safety. Then, to prove it wasn't a fluke, he scored 2 more consecutive points by sacking quarterback Jim Delgado in the end zone. Defensive end Ben Davidson missed the 1972 season due to injury, tried to make a comeback in 1973's training camp, but retired instead. At the start of the training camp, only 26 players in the NFL weighed more than 265 pounds. Only 10 weighed more than 280 pounds, and only 1 weighed more than 290 pounds. Oakland tackle Gene Ferguson was 6'8", 300 pounds, but he failed to make the team. So the heaviest player for 1973 was Chargers tackle Russ Washington at 289 pounds. The average made field goal percentage in 1973 was 62.5, with the NFL leader being the Browns' Don Cockcroft with a 71% success rate. This footage shows how very different kicking conditions, for the most part anyway, are to today's conditions. The Ineptitude Award goes to number 11, Dick Shiner, for directing 2 first downs and 83 total yards of offense on only 2 of 9 passing for 17 yards. Shiner's first pass completion came with 4 minutes 35 seconds remaining in this Week 2 game. The Jets were again without the quarterbacking services of Joe Namath in Week 5. Bill Demery took over and led the Jets to a 9-7 win despite only completing 1 of 7 passes for 11 yards. The Jets rushed the ball 58 times. Imagine this happening in today's game. In Week 2, Colts quarterback Burt Jones threw 4 interceptions and was pulled from the game. Enter Marty Domrays, who also threw 4 interceptions, including 2 pick sixes. In 1973, there were only 24 instances where a receiver had 100 or more receiving yards in a single game. John Gilliam led with 4 games. Harold Carmichael had 3 games, as did Charlie Taylor. Bears quarterback Bobby Douglas had a unique stat line in Week 8. 3 pass completions for 17 gross yards, while rushing 19 times for an even 100 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. The NFL's most prolific rushing team was the Rams, as they led the league in rushing attempts and were second in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. They averaged 48 rushes per game compared to only 19 passes per game. In Week 1, O.J. Simpson ran 29 times for an NFL single-game record 250 yards. He'd rushed 332 times, almost 24 carries per game, which led the NFL. His 12 rushing touchdowns also led the NFL, and his 6.0 average yards per carry was second best. He averaged 143.1 rushing yards per game, which accounted for an NFL record 2,003 rushing yards. In today's 17-game season, his average yards per carry would equate to 2,433 yards. Larry Zonka finished the 1973 season with 1,003 rushing yards, which was second best in the AFC, exactly 1,000 yards less than O.J. Simpson. The Dolphins also had a menacing defense. They only allowed 92.1 passing yards per game and 5 passing touchdowns. Those high tops belong to Johnny U, John Unitas. The Chargers paid the Colts more than $100,000 to acquire the rights to Unitas. Unitas' body was toast, and the Chargers began grooming number 14 Dan Fouts for stardom. He'd end up in the Hall of Fame just like Unitas. What happened to Chargers quarterback John Hadl? He was deemed expendable due to his long passing game philosophy clashing with the short passing game philosophy that was preferred by offensive coordinator Bob Schnelker, so he was traded to the Rams. What happened to Rams quarterback Roman Gabriel? He objected to John Hadl's presence and was traded for a slew of high draft picks, wide receiver Harold Jackson, and running back Tony Baker. Colts general manager Joe Thomas traded defensive end Billy Newsome and a 4th-round draft pick for New Orleans' 1st-round draft pick, the 2nd overall, and the Colts used the pick to select quarterback Burt Jones. NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle fined 8 San Diego Chargers for drug usage, pot. Among the players were defensive lineman Coy Bacon and Deacon Jones. On November 25, 1973, the Vikings paid tribute to strong safety Carl Kasulki, who was paralyzed from the waist down, a victim of a motorcycle accident just one day before training camp opened. I had the pleasure of meeting him in 1974, and I found him to be a fine person. While the Bears were warming up prior to their Week 10 game, the great Dick Butkus had already played his last NFL game the week before.